The throne room of the Eternal Dominion stretched for nearly a kilometer. Pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling that glowed with captured starlight. At the far end, upon a throne carved from the core of a dead planet, sat Emperor Vorath, the undying dot. He had ruled the Krell Dominion for 3,000 years. His empire covered 40,000 worlds. Species that had built civilizations when humanity still lived in caves had knelt before him and begged for mercy. Some he had spared. Most he had not. Today, his advisors brought him news of a small species on the edge of his territory. They called themselves humans. "Show me," Vorath commanded. His voice echoed through the massive chamber like thunder. A holographic display appeared before his throne. It showed a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. The planet had one large moon and several billion inhabitants. The humans had spread to 12 star systems in the past 2 centuries. They had basic faster-than-light travel. They had simple energy weapons. They were, by galactic standards, children. High Commander Draven stepped forward. He was the Emperor's greatest warrior, a giant even among the Krell. His body was covered in the scars of 1,000 battles. "They have been expanding toward our border, my Emperor," Draven said. "They do not yet know we exist. They are weak, primitive. Conquering them would take less than a single cycle." Advisor Melta, an ancient Krell who had served the Emperor for 2,000 years, nodded in agreement. They possess nothing of value except their worlds and their labor. They would make acceptable servants. Emperor Vorath studied the image of Earth. He watched the clouds move across its surface. He saw the lights of their cities glowing on the night side. Such a fragile little world. Such fragile little creatures. He smiled. "I will give them a chance to surrender," Vorath said. "It amuses me to watch lesser species grovel." He raised his hand, and his communications officers prepared a transmission. The message would be sent directly to Earth, broadcast on every frequency, displayed on every screen. The humans would have no choice but to listen. Vorath stood from his throne. He was massive, nearly 4 meters tall, with skin like black iron and eyes that burned with ancient fire. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 millennia of absolute power. "Primitive creatures of Earth," he began. "I am Emperor Vorath, the Undying, ruler of the Krell Dominion. Your worlds now belong to me. Your people now belong to me. You have 7 cycles to surrender completely. You will give us your technology. You will give us your resources. You will give us yourselves as servants." He paused, letting his words sink in. Resistance is not merely futile. It is laughable. Civilizations 1,000 times your age have knelt before me. Species that conquered galaxies when your ancestors lived in mud have begged for my mercy. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. You will kneel, or you will burn. He ended the transmission and returned to his throne. Around him, his advisors laughed. This conquest would be the easiest in Dominion history, on Earth. The message arrived at 3 in the morning, local time in Geneva. Every screen on the planet suddenly showed the face of Emperor Vorath. Every speaker broadcast his words. Billions of humans woke to the sight of an alien emperor, demanding their surrender. Panic spread quickly. News networks went into emergency broadcast mode. Governments issued statements asking for calm. Religious leaders spoke of the end times. Stock markets crashed within hours. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all 12 human colonies attended via holographic link. The chamber was filled with shouting voices and fearful faces. "We must surrender," one delegate cried. "You saw the size of their empire. 40,000 worlds. We have 12. We cannot fight this. Perhaps we can negotiate," another suggested. "Offer them tribute. Buy ourselves time." "Time for what?" a third delegate shouted. They will enslave us either way. At least if we surrender, we might survive." The arguments continued for hours. Fear filled the room like poison gas. Hope seemed to die with every passing minute. Then Admiral Park Tae-ho stood up. He was not a large man. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with age. He had served in Earth's defense forces for 40 years. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies. He had led the response to first contact with hostile aliens a century ago. He had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. He waited until the room fell silent. "I have listened to your fear," he said calmly. "I understand it. An empire that has ruled for 3,000 years has threatened to destroy everything we love. Any reasonable person would be afraid." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each delegate. "But I have also seen something that the Emperor has not. I have seen what humanity can do when we are pushed against the wall. I have seen farmers become soldiers. I have seen scientists become warriors. I have seen ordinary people do extraordinary things when their homes and families are threatened." He walked to the center of the chamber. The Emperor smiled when he sent his message. He smiled because he believes we are weak. He believes we will kneel like all the others. He believes that because we are young, we are helpless. Admiral Park Tae-ho allowed himself a small smile. Let him smile. Let him laugh. He has never met humanity. He turned to face the main screen, where the Emperor's message still played on loop. "We have not been idle since first contact. We have been preparing. For a century, we have been building weapons that the galaxy has never seen. We have been training soldiers that fight like no others. We have been watching, learning, and waiting." He pressed a button on his console. The Emperor's image disappeared. In its place appeared a single word: Prometheus. "It is time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth." In her laboratory deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Dr. Yoon Hana received a priority message. She was the chief scientist of Project Prometheus, a program so secret that fewer than 100 people knew it existed. She had spent 30 years developing weapons that would make the Krell, Dominion's technology, look like children's toys. She read the message twice. Then she smiled. "Finally," she whispered. She picked up her communicator and contacted her team. "Wake everyone up," she ordered. Project Prometheus is now active. Across human space, in hidden facilities and secret bases, scientists and soldiers received the same message. Weapons that have been dormant for decades powered up. Ships that have been hiding in asteroid fields came to life. An entire military force that the galaxy did not know existed prepared for war. Emperor Varath sat on his throne, waiting for humanity's surrender. He expected groveling. He expected begging. He expected the same pathetic submission he had seen from 1,000 other species. He had no idea what was coming. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, General Kim Dae-sung watched his soldiers prepare for war. The underground base stretched for 50 kilometers in every direction. It held equipment, vehicles, and weapons that the public had never seen. It held the Ghost Legions. These soldiers were not ordinary men and women. They had been selected from billions of candidates. They had trained for their entire adult lives. They wore powered armor that made them 10 times stronger than normal humans. They carried weapons that could punch through starship hulls. But their most dangerous ability was the quantum displacement system built into their suits. With the press of a button, they could phase through solid matter. They could walk through walls. They could appear inside enemy ships without warning. They were ghosts made flesh, and they were hungry for battle. General Kim walked among his troops. He had served in the military for 35 years. He had fought in conflicts across human space. He had lost friends, comrades, and family to violence. He knew the cost of war better than anyone. "You have trained for this moment your entire lives," he told them. "The enemy believes we are weak. They believe we will surrender without a fight. They are wrong. 20,000 Ghost Legion soldiers stood at attention. Their faces were hard. Their eyes were cold. They were ready. When we board their ships, General Kim continued, they will not understand what is happening. They have never faced soldiers like us. They have never fought an enemy that can appear from nowhere. We will show them fear. We will show them death. We will show them what humanity can do. The soldiers raised their weapons in salute. The sound echoed through the underground chamber like thunder. Far away, in the darkness between stars, Captain Lee Soo-bin guided her ship through the void. The Silent Thunder was a stealth carrier, 2 kilometers long and completely invisible to any known sensor system. Its hull was covered in light-bending panels that made it disappear against the background of space. Its engines produced no heat signature. Its communications used quantum encryption that could not be intercepted. Soo-bin had been a pilot since she was 18 years old. She had flown everything from small fighters to massive battleships. She had been selected to command the Silent Thunder because she was the best. Not one of the best. The best. Her squadron consisted of 12 stealth carriers and over 200 smaller ships. They had been hiding in deep space for 3 years, waiting for this moment. Now they moved into position behind where the Krell fleet would arrive. All ships report ready. Her second-in-command announced. Soo-bin nodded. Maintain radio silence. We wait until Admiral Park gives the signal. She looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy fleet was preparing to attack her home. They thought they were hunters. They did not know that they were walking into a trap. On Earth, Director Choi Yuna sat in her office at the center of humanity's intelligence network. Screens covered every wall, showing information from across the galaxy. She had spent 40 years building this network. She had agents on Krell worlds. She had access to their communications. She knew their secrets. The Krell had never bothered to protect their information from inferior species. They did not encrypt messages sent near human space. They did not guard against human spies. Their arrogance had made them blind. Yuna knew the position of every Krell military base. She knew the location of every supply route. She knew the names of their commanders and the weaknesses of their ships. She knew that Emperor Varath had exactly 50,847 warships in his invasion fleet. She also knew something else. For decades, her agents had been placing weapons throughout Krell space, hidden in asteroids, buried on moons, disguised as space debris. The Krell had no idea that humanity had already surrounded them. She contacted Admiral Park Tae-ho on a secure channel. Everything is in position, she reported. When you give the word, we can strike their supply lines, their communication centers, and their homeworlds simultaneously. Admiral Park nodded. Good work, Director. When this is over, the galaxy will owe you a debt they will never know about. Yuna smiled. She preferred it that way. Dr. Yoon Hana worked without sleep for 5 days straight. Project Prometheus was her life's work. She had designed weapons that the galaxy had never imagined. The core of the project was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Humanity had built a network of kinetic weapons hidden inside asteroids throughout their space. Each weapon was essentially a railgun the size of a skyscraper. Each projectile was a solid block of tungsten wrapped in a magnetic containment field. When fired, these projectiles would accelerate to 99.7% of the speed of light. At that velocity, a single projectile carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. The Krell had no defense against such weapons. No one did. But Prometheus was more than just kinetic weapons. Hana had also developed directed energy systems powered by captured antimatter. These weapons were hidden on moons throughout the solar system. They could cut through any known armor. They could destroy entire fleets in seconds. Final checks are complete, her assistant reported. All systems are operational. Hannah nodded. She thought about the Emperor's message. She thought about his smile. She thought about his threats against her home, her family, her species. Let him come, she whispered. Let him see what happens when you threaten humanity. 6 days passed. Emperor Vorath waited for Earth's surrender. Each day, his advisors assured him that the humans were simply too afraid to respond. Each day, he grew more confident in his easy victory. On the 7th day, he received a message that it was not a surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was not even a negotiation, that it was a single sentence. Broadcast on all frequencies, signed by Admiral Park Tae-ho, Supreme Commander of Earth's United Defense Fleet. Come and take them. Emperor Vorath stared at the message for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. The sound filled his throne room and echoed off the ancient walls. They dare to challenge me? He roared. These insects dare to defy the Krell Dominion? High Commander Draven stepped forward. Give me the order, my Emperor. I will crush them personally. Vorath nodded. Assemble the fleet. 50,000 ships. We will burn their worlds and enslave their people. We will make an example of them that the galaxy will never forget. Draven bowed and left to prepare the invasion. Advisor Malta watched him go with ancient eyes. Something about humanity's response troubled him. In 2,000 years of service, he had seen countless species receive the Emperor's ultimatum. All of them had responded with fear. All of them had begged or surrendered or fled. None of them had ever said, "Come and take them." My Emperor, Malta said carefully, perhaps we should send scouts first. Learn more about their defenses. Vorath dismissed him with a wave. You grow cautious in your old age, Malta. These humans are nothing. They have no fleet. They have no weapons. They have nothing but empty words. He smiled again, already imagining his victory. In 7 days, Earth will burn. Across the galaxy, Admiral Park Tae-ho received word that the Krell fleet was mobilizing. He stood on the bridge of his command station, hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid near Jupiter. They took the bait, he said quietly. Around him, officers monitored screens showing the positions of hidden weapons, stealth ships, and ground forces. Everything was ready. The trap was set. Park Tae-ho allowed himself a small smile. The Emperor thought he was coming to conquer weak prey. He had no idea that he was walking into the jaws of a predator. All units, the Admiral broadcast on secure channels. The enemy is coming. Remember what we fight for. Remember your families. Remember your homes. He paused, looking out at the stars. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. Today, we make them remember our name forever. The silence of space held its breath. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin. The sky tore open. 50,000 Krell warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. They appeared in a wave of light and energy that could be seen from Neptune. The smallest ships were half a kilometer long. The largest, including the Emperor's flagship Eternal Dominion, were the size of small moons. Emperor Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human solar system appear on his screens. He had conquered hundreds of star systems. He had destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. This would be no different. Report, he commanded. High Commander Draven checked his sensors. No enemy fleet detected, my Emperor. No orbital defenses. No weapons platforms. He paused, confusion in his voice. Nothing at all. Vorath studied the tactical display. Earth in the distance, a tiny blue dot against the blackness of space. Between his fleet and the human homeworld, there was only empty space and a belt of asteroids. They have hidden, Advisor Malta suggested. Perhaps they hope we will not find them. "There is nowhere to hide from the Dominion," Varth replied. "Draven, take us in." Standard conquest formation. The Krell fleet began to move. 50,000 ships advanced toward Earth like a wave of death. Their weapons were charged. Their soldiers were ready. They expected no resistance. On the bridge of her stealth carrier, Captain Lee Su-bin watched the enemy fleet pass her position. Her ships were completely invisible, floating in the darkness behind the Krell armada. She could see the glow of their engines, the flash of their running lights. "Steady," she whispered to her crew. "We wait for the signal." Her hands were calm on the controls. Her heart beat slowly and evenly. She had trained for this moment her entire life. She was ready. Admiral Park Tae-ho watched from his hidden command center as the Krell fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune. They were moving fast, eager for conquest. They had no idea what waited for them. "Let them come deeper," he ordered. "Let them commit fully." His officers tracked the enemy ships on screens that showed every hidden weapon, every stealth vessel, every prepared trap. The solar system had been turned into a killing ground. The Krell were walking into a cage made of fire and death. The fleet passed Uranus. Then Saturn. The great ringed planet seemed to watch silently as the invaders moved past. Emperor Varth grew impatient. Why do they not respond? Why do they not beg for mercy? "Perhaps they are too afraid to speak," Draven suggested. "Or perhaps they are preparing something," Malta said quietly. Varth ignored his old advisor. "Increase speed. I want to see Earth burn before the next cycle ends." The fleet pushed forward. They crossed the orbit of Jupiter, passing close to the massive gas giant. They entered the asteroid belt, weaving between rocks that had floated here for billions of years. Admiral Park Tae-ho took a deep breath. "Now," he said, "the asteroids came alive. What the Krell had believed were dead rocks revealed themselves as weapons platforms, carriers, and fortress stations. Over 2,000 hidden installations activated at the same moment. Hatches opened in asteroid surfaces. Weapons powered up. Ships launched from hidden hangars. Emperor Varth watched in disbelief as the tactical display exploded with new contacts. "Impossible," he whispered. But it was only the beginning. Behind the Krell fleet, Captain Lee Su-bin's stealth squadron decloaked. 12 carriers and 200 smaller ships appeared from nothing, cutting off the enemy's retreat. Their weapons were already targeting Krell engines and shield generators. Admiral Park Tae-ho's voice echoed across all frequencies, broadcast to both human and Krell forces. "Emperor Varth, you came to our home with threats and demands. You expected us to kneel. You expected us to beg. You were wrong." On the Eternal Dominion, the Emperor gripped the arms of his command chair. For the first time in 3,000 years, he felt something he barely recognized. It was fear. "You are surrounded," Admiral Park continued. "Your escape routes are blocked. Your fleet is trapped. But we are not finished." He paused. "Now witness Project Prometheus." The first wave of kinetic projectiles launched from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt. They accelerated to near-light speed in seconds, too fast for any sensor to track. They crossed the distance to the Krell fleet in the blink of an eye. The outer formations of the Krell armada simply ceased to exist. 3,000 warships vanished in nuclear fire within the first 30 seconds. The kinetic projectiles hit with the force of exploding suns. Ships that had survived thousands of battles were torn apart like paper. Crews that had conquered countless worlds died before they could even scream. High Commander Draven shouted orders, trying to organize a defense. But there was no defense against weapons traveling at the speed of light. By the time you saw them, you were already dead. "Return fire!" Varth screamed. "Destroy those asteroids." The Krell fleet opened fire on the asteroid installations. But the weapons platforms were heavily armored and spread across millions of kilometers. For every one they destroyed, a dozen more continued firing. The second wave of Prometheus projectiles launched. Another 2,000 Krell ships died in fire. Captain Lee Soo-bin led her squadron into the chaos. Her stealth ships targeted Krell carriers and command vessels, crippling their ability to coordinate. Her pilots were the best in human space, and they flew through the enemy fleet like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, striking and vanishing. "Focus on their communication ships," she ordered. "Blind them." Her ships obeyed. Krell vessels that carried the fleet's communication systems exploded one after another. The Emperor's ability to command his forces died with them. On the Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vorith watched his fleet burn. Ships that had taken centuries to build were destroyed in seconds. Soldiers who had served him for generations died in fire and vacuum. The tactical display turned red with losses. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be weak." Advisor Melta stood silently beside the throne. He had warned the Emperor. He had suggested caution. But Vorith's arrogance had been too great. "They were never weak," Melta said quietly. "We simply never bothered to look." Another wave of explosions rocked the flagship. The shields held, but barely. Outside, the Krell armada was being torn apart piece by piece. Admiral Park Tae-ho watched the battle unfold from his command center. So far, everything had gone according to plan. The Krell were trapped, confused, and dying. But the battle was not yet won. "Status report," he ordered. "Enemy fleet reduced by 40%, an officer announced. Approximately 30,000 ships remaining. Our casualties are minimal." "Good. Begin Phase 2. Across the solar system, new weapons activated. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, directed energy platforms powered up. These were Dr. Yoon Hana's masterwork, antimatter power beams that could cut through any armor ever created. The beams lanced out across space, invisible until they struck their targets. Krell dreadnoughts, the largest and most powerful ships in the enemy fleet, began to die. Each beam sliced through shields and hull plates like a knife through water. Emperor Vorith watched his dreadnoughts fall. These were ships that had taken decades to build, crewed by his most loyal warriors. They died in seconds. "Retreat," he ordered suddenly. "All ships retreat." But there was nowhere to retreat to. Captain Lee Soo-bin's squadron had blocked the escape routes. The Prometheus weapons covered every direction. The Krell fleet was trapped in a cage of fire, and the cage was getting smaller by the minute. High Commander Draven turned to his Emperor. "My lord, we must escape. The flagship can break through their line if we concentrate all our firepower." Vorith hesitated. Running was not something emperors did. But dying was worse. "Do it," he commanded. The Eternal Dominion began to move, pushing toward the weakest point in the human encirclement. Around it, the remains of the Krell fleet formed a protective wall, sacrificing themselves to save their emperor. Admiral Park Tae-ho saw the movement immediately. "They're trying to run," he observed. Captain Lee stopped them. "With pleasure, sir," Soo-bin replied. The Silent Thunder accelerated toward the Emperor's flagship. Its experimental dimensional slip drive activated, allowing the ship to phase through normal space. The Krell had never seen anything like it. The stealth carrier appeared inside the Eternal Dominion's shield perimeter, directly beside the flagship's main hangar bay. "Fire everything," Soo-bin ordered. The Silent Thunder unloaded its entire weapons payload at point-blank range. Explosions tore through the Eternal Dominion's lower decks. The hangar bay, containing thousands of fighter craft, erupted in fire. The flagship shuddered and slowed. Its engines flickered. Its shields began to fail. On the bridge, Emperor Vorath, the Undying, felt his ship dying around him. The lights flickered. The deck tilted. Alarms screamed in every corridor. For the first time in 3,000 years, the smile was gone from his face. The battle had become a slaughter. Across the solar system, Krell warships burned and died. The once mighty armada of 50,000 ships had been reduced to less than 15,000 in just 3 hours. The vacuum of space was filled with debris, frozen bodies, and the screams of dying vessels. General Kim Dee soon watched the battle from a transport ship approaching the Krell command carrier. His ghost legions were ready. 20,000 soldiers in quantum displacement armor, the deadliest infantry force ever created. Target acquired, his pilot announced. The carrier's shields are down. We have a clear approach. Kim nodded. All units prepare for boarding. Remember your training. Phase in, eliminate the bridge crew. Phase out. No prisoners, no mercy. The transport ships accelerated toward the Krell command carrier. They did not dock or land. Instead, the Ghost Legion soldiers simply walked through the hull. Their quantum displacement systems activated, and they passed through solid metal like ghosts moving through fog. One moment they were outside the ship. The next moment they were inside, appearing in corridors and chambers throughout the vessel. The Krell crew had never experienced anything like this. Soldiers appeared from nowhere, inside walls, through floors, behind sealed doors. There was no warning. There was no defense. Kim Dae-sung materialized on the bridge of the command carrier. The Krell officers turned to face him, reaching for their weapons. They were too slow. He moved through them like death itself. His powered armor made him faster than any Krell could follow. His weapons cut through their bodies like they were made of paper. In less than 30 seconds, every officer on the bridge was dead. Bridge secured, he reported calmly. Moving to engineering. Across the Krell fleet, the same scene repeated itself on hundreds of ships. Ghost Legion soldiers appeared inside vessels that thought they were safe. They killed crews that had no warning. They destroyed ships from the inside out. High Commander Draven received reports of the impossible attacks on his personal cruiser. Soldiers appearing from nowhere. Entire crews massacred in minutes. Ships falling silent one after another. What are these creatures? He demanded. How do they move through walls? No one could answer him. The Krell had conquered the galaxy through superior firepower and numbers. They had never faced an enemy that could simply walk through their defenses. A proximity alarm screamed. Draven turned to see 7 bright lights approaching his ship at impossible speed. Prometheus projectiles. Evasive action. He shouted, but there was no evading weapons that traveled at near light speed. The projectiles struck his cruiser simultaneously. The ship exploded in a ball of fire that briefly rivaled a small sun. High Commander Draven, the Emperor's greatest warrior, died without ever seeing his killer. On the Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vorath felt his flagship shudder under another impact. Captain Li Zubin's attack had crippled their engines. The great ship drifted helplessly, unable to escape. Status report. Vorath demanded. An officer looked up with terror in his eyes. Engines at 12%. Shields failing. We have boarders on decks 7 through 15. Boarders? The Emperor's voice cracked. How did they get past our defenses? They did not, my lord. They simply appeared. Vorath turned to Advisor Melta. The ancient Krell stood calmly, watching the destruction unfold on the tactical displays. You knew, Vorath accused. You knew they were not weak. I suspected, Melta replied. But you would not listen. Your arrogance blinded you, just as it has blinded every emperor before you. How dare you? An explosion rocked the ship. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the bridge in red shadows. Through the viewports, Vorath could see his fleet dying. Ships that had served the Dominion for centuries burned like candles in a wind. Dr. Humanit monitored the battle from her control center on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Her weapons were performing beyond expectations. The antimatter beams were cutting through Krell armor like it did not exist. The Prometheus projectiles were devastating entire formations. But she was not satisfied. "Target the enemy flagship," she ordered. "Low power beam. Disable their weapon systems." Her technicians adjusted the targeting. A beam of focused energy lanced across space, striking the Eternal Dominion. The flagship's main weapons arrays exploded. Its ability to fight back died in an instant. "Weapons disabled," a technician confirmed. Hana nodded. "Inform Admiral Park. The Emperor is ready for collection." Admiral Park Taeho received the message with grim satisfaction. The battle was essentially won. The Krell fleet had been reduced to fewer than 5,000 ships, most of them damaged and unable to fight effectively. Human casualties were remarkably light, but he had one more task to complete. "Prepare my shuttle," he ordered. "I'm going aboard the enemy flagship." His officers protested. It was too dangerous. The Emperor might be desperate. There could be traps. Park silenced them with a raised hand. "The Emperor threatened our world. He demanded our surrender. He promised to enslave our children. I will look him in the eye and show him what his arrogance has cost." The shuttle launched from the hidden command center and flew toward the crippled Eternal Dominion. Around it, the remains of the Krell fleet burned and drifted. Director Choi Yuna's cyber warfare teams had completed their work. They had infiltrated every remaining Krell ship's computer system. False orders were broadcast on command frequencies. Navigation systems showed incorrect positions. Weapons targeted friendly vessels. The Krell fleet destroyed itself from within. Ships collided with each other in the confusion. Weapons fire struck allied vessels instead of enemies. Commanders screamed orders that were never received, or received orders that had never been sent. It was chaos. It was slaughter. It was exactly what Yuna had planned. She watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. These aliens had threatened her world, her people, her family. Now, they learned the price of that threat. Admiral Park's shuttle docked with the Eternal Dominion through a breach in the hull. A squad of Ghost Legion soldiers had already secured the path to the bridge. They stood at attention as the Admiral walked past. The flagship was dying around them. Fires burned in distant corridors. Emergency systems screamed warnings. The bodies of Krell soldiers lay everywhere, victims of the Ghost Legion's boarding action. Park walked calmly through the destruction. He had seen war before. He had seen death before. This was simply the end of a battle that had been inevitable since the Emperor's first threat. The bridge doors opened. Emperor Varath the Undying stood before his throne, surrounded by the last of his guards. They raised their weapons, ready to die defending their master. Park raised his hand. "Let them try." General Kim Dae-sung stepped out of the wall beside him, followed by 20 Ghost Legion soldiers. They appeared from nowhere, their weapons already aimed at the Krell guards. "Drop your weapons," Kim ordered, "or die where you stand." The guards looked to their emperor. Vorath's face was a mask of rage and disbelief. For 3,000 years, no enemy had ever reached his throne room. For 3,000 years, he had been untouchable. Now a human stood before him, calmly demanding his surrender. "Kill him," Vorath ordered. His guards opened fire. The Ghost Legion soldiers phased out of existence for a split second, letting the shots pass through empty space. Then they phased back and returned fire. The last defenders of the Krell Emperor fell in seconds. Admiral Park Taeho walked toward the throne. His boots echoed on the blood-stained deck. His eyes never left the Emperor's face. "You came to our world with 50,000 ships," Park said quietly. "You threatened to enslave our children. You demanded that we kneel. He stopped just meters from the ancient ruler. Look around you, Emperor. Look at what remains of your fleet. Look at what happens when you threaten humanity. Through the viewports, the solar system burned with the wreckage of the greatest military force in galactic history. 45,000 warships had been destroyed in less than 6 hours. Emperor Vorath the Undying fell to his knees. Not because anyone forced him, but because his legs would no longer support the weight of his defeat. Impossible, he whispered. You were supposed to be primitive. You were supposed to be weak. Admiral Park looked down at him with something close to pity. We were never weak, he said. We were just waiting for you. He turned to General Kim. Secure the prisoner. We're not done yet. The battle for the solar system was over, but humanity's message to the galaxy had only just begun. The throne room of the Eternal Dominion had been cleared of bodies. The blood had been washed from the deck. The damaged systems had been silenced. Now it served a different purpose. Emperor Vorath the Undying knelt in the center of the room, his hands bound behind his back. Around him stood human soldiers, their weapons ready. Above him, cameras broadcast his image to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Park Taiho had arranged this moment carefully. Every species in the Krell Dominion would witness it. Every world that had suffered under the Emperor's rule would see their oppressor brought low. Every being who had ever dreamed of freedom would watch humanity deliver their answer to tyranny. Park stood before the kneeling Emperor, his back straight and his voice steady. For 3,000 years you ruled through fear, he began. You crushed anyone who dared to stand against you. You enslaved entire species. You destroyed civilizations that refused to kneel. You believed that power gave you the right to do whatever you wished. He paused, letting his words echo through the silent room. You were wrong. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the broadcast. On Krell worlds, citizens stared at their screens in disbelief. On enslaved planets, oppressed peoples wept with joy. On neutral worlds, leaders reconsidered their assumptions about the young species called humanity. 7 days ago, you sent a message to Earth, Park continued. You demanded our surrender. You threatened to burn our worlds and enslave our people. You smiled as you said these words, confident that we would kneel like all the others. He stepped closer to the Emperor. Now look at what remains of your mighty fleet. 45,000 warships destroyed. Your greatest commanders dead. Your homeworld surrounded by weapons you cannot detect or defend against. Dr. Yoon Hana had confirmed this hours ago. During the decades of preparation, Director Choi Yuna's agents had hidden Prometheus weapons throughout Krell space. Asteroids in their home systems contained kinetic launchers. Moons orbiting their capital worlds held antimatter beams. The Dominion was already defeated. They simply did not know it yet. You have a choice, Admiral Park said. Surrender completely. Dissolve your military forces. Release every enslaved species. Accept responsibility for your crimes. The Emperor looked up, hatred burning in his ancient eyes. And if I refuse? Then every weapon we have hidden throughout your empire will activate. Your capital world will be the first to burn. Then your colonies. Then every planet that has ever served you. The Krell Dominion will become nothing but ash and memory. Park's voice held no anger, no satisfaction. Only cold certainty. Choose. Emperor Vorath the Undying had ruled for 3,000 years. He had broken the will of countless enemies. He had watched civilizations beg for mercy at his feet. Never once had he considered surrender, but he had also never faced an enemy like humanity. He looked around the room at the human soldiers, their faces hard and determined. He thought about the battle he had just lost, the fleet that had been destroyed, the weapons that now surrounded his home worlds. He thought about the species he had dismissed as primitive and weak. They had been preparing for this moment for a century. They had hidden their strength. They had let him underestimate them. They had turned his own arrogance into a weapon against him. For the first time in 3 millennia, Vorath understood that he had been outmatched. "I surrender," he said quietly. "Completely and unconditionally." The words echoed through the throne room and across the galaxy. 1,000 enslaved species heard their oppressor admit defeat. 1,000,000 resistance movements saw their impossible dream become reality. The galactic order that had existed for 3,000 years ended in a single sentence. Admiral Park nodded slowly. "Your surrender is accepted. You will be taken to Earth, where you will face trial for your crimes. The Krell military will be disbanded. All enslaved species will be released. The Dominion is ended." He turned to face the cameras, speaking directly to the watching galaxy. "To every species that suffered under Krell rule, humanity extends its hand in friendship. We did not fight this war for conquest. We did not seek to become the new rulers of the galaxy. We fought because free beings have the right to defend themselves. We fought because no one should be forced to kneel." He paused, his voice softening. "The age of empires is over. Today, we begin something new. A free galaxy where every species can determine its own fate. A galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. A galaxy where peace is built on respect, not fear." Captain Lee Su-bin watched the broadcast from the bridge of the Silent Thunder. Her ship had survived the battle with only minor damage. Her crew had performed beyond all expectations. She felt a deep pride in what they had accomplished. An hour later, she received new orders. She was being promoted to Admiral and assigned to lead the new Galactic Free Alliance fleet. Her mission would be to protect the newly liberated species as they rebuilt their societies. She accepted the promotion with quiet determination. The war was over, but the work of building peace had just begun. General Kim Da-sum stood in the ruins of the Krell military headquarters on their home world. His ghost legions had secured the facility without resistance. The Krell soldiers, demoralized by their emperor's surrender, had simply laid down their weapons. He had spent his entire career preparing for war. Now he would spend the rest of it preventing one. The occupation of Krell space would require careful management to avoid creating new resentments, new hatreds, new conflicts. It was a challenge he welcomed. Building peace was harder than waging war, but far more important. Director Choi Yuna dissolved her intelligence network's combat operations. The agents who had spent decades infiltrating Krell space were reassigned to new missions. Instead of preparing for war, they would help establish communication systems, connecting the free worlds of the galaxy. She had lived in shadows for 40 years. Now she could step into the light. Dr. Yoon Hannah returned to Earth, to her laboratory beneath the Antarctic ice. Project Prometheus had served its purpose. Now she began work on new projects. Technologies that would heal instead of destroy, build instead of break. She kept the Prometheus weapons active, hidden throughout the galaxy. Peace required the ability to defend it, but she hoped they would never be used again. Admiral Park Tae-ho retired 6 months after the war. He had done what he set out to do. He had protected his home. He had freed a galaxy. He had proven that humanity would never kneel. When journalists asked him how a young species had defeated an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years, he always gave the same answer. The emperor made one mistake. He assumed that because we were young, we were weak. He forgot that young species have something ancient empires lose. We have the fire to fight for tomorrow. We have hope. On a distant world, centuries later, a Krell historian completed the official record of the war. It would be preserved in the galactic archives forever, a warning to any who might think of threatening Earth again. The historian was old now, one of the few who remembered the days of the Dominion. He had been a child when the Emperor fell, a young student when the Free Alliance was formed. He had spent his life studying the event that changed everything. He finished his account with the words that would echo through history. In the year 2347, Emperor Vorath the Undying smiled and threatened a small world called Earth. He demanded their surrender. He promised to burn their cities and enslave their children. He was confident that these young, primitive beings would kneel like all the others. The historian paused, remembering the broadcasts he had watched as a child. The burning fleet, the kneeling emperor, the human admiral who spoke of freedom. It was the last time he ever smiled. For on that day, the galaxy learned a truth that would echo through eternity. A truth written in fire and blood and the wreckage of 50,000 warships. He typed the final words of his record. Humanity does not kneel. The archive sealed. The record was complete. And across the free galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, children of 100 different species learned the story of the small blue planet that had changed everything. They learned about the admiral who refused to surrender, the scientist who built impossible weapons, the pilot who struck the Emperor's flagship, the general who walked through walls, the spy master who knew every secret. They learned about humanity. And they learned the most important lesson of all. That freedom is worth fighting for. That the young can defeat the ancient. That the small can overcome the mighty. That no one has to kneel. On Earth, in a quiet garden beside a peaceful sea, an old man named Park Taiho sat watching the sunset. He was alone now. His war was over. His battles were done. But sometimes, when the light was right and the wind was calm, he allowed himself a small smile. The Emperor had smiled once, confident in his power. Now it was humanity's turn.